So I was just thinking about my video today on Al Mohler and his comments on the election, and just, Big Eva's MO in general. It's so predictable. It's so sad. It's so pathetic. In my book that's coming out, How to Defeat the Woke Church Movement, one of the things I talk about is how the social justice movement and the woke church frames things in such an evil, twisted way. Like to abuse language to such a degree that you make words mean the opposite. It's just so evil. Nothing could be more satanic than to distort and twist and mess with words. Like the whole idea that justice can somehow be showing partiality to black people against white people in your churches, and somehow that's just, somehow that's good. That's so evil, man. Like, it's just pretty ridiculous, and you can see just how they're framing things in such a way to completely make the most reasonable, biblical, Christian approach to things, to make it seem like evil, to make it seem radical. I noticed this back during the pandemic. If you remember, there were a lot of Gospel Coalition's articles coming out about how to love your neighbor, right? And the thing is, when you say love your neighbor, you're basically saying this is God's law. Like, if you don't do this, you're actually disobeying God. And so they say you have to wear a mask to love your neighbor. That's Phariseeism, man. That's adding to the law of God. In fact, that's upside down. No. You don't have to wear a mask to worship in order to love your neighbor. That's God never said that. You should be very, very wary. You should be scared to speak in that way, because if you're speaking where God has not spoken, that's blasphemous. That's false prophecy. Like, people used to get stoned for that kind of thing back in the day. But here we have Gospel Coalition saying, what better way to love your neighbor than to put a piece of cloth over your face and hide your face? It's like they should be terrified to lie about God like so easily, and they just do it all the time. But that's not even the point. The point is, they frame it as there's two positions, and they're both like, we got on the one side the good position, definitely wear a mask, it's how you love your neighbor, and on the other side, the people like me, the radical. This is the thing. How reasonable is this position? But they want you to think this is radical. Here's what I say: don't be scared of the coronavirus pandemic, but if you are, go ahead and wear your mask. I'm not going to wear my mask because I fear God more than I fear the coronavirus, so I'm not going to wear my mask at church. That's the reasonable way forward, right? Like, if your conscience is bound, do what you have to do, but don't bind other people's conscience. That's biblical wisdom there. I'm not bragging, that just is. If your conscience is bound, don't bind other people's conscience just because yours is bound. That's the obvious way forward. Open up your church, and if you want to wear a mask, you should be allowed to wear a mask. Definitely, you're not required to wear a mask. That's the only biblical way forward during this, and somehow that's the radical position of hating your neighbor and wanting grandma dead. Like, how twisted is that, man? That's like, nothing could be more satanic than to frame things in such a way that you make the most obvious, biblical, wise approach to this kind of thing, the approach that Paul himself taught, right? The approach that Paul himself taught. That's radical and evil. That's not loving your neighbor. Bro, that's upside down. That's upside down, man. I would be very scared to be teaching that kind of thing. And I noticed this, too, in Al Mohler's article about the election. The whole article is like, you'd have to be intellectually dishonest. You'd have to be lying to not know that Joe Biden is the president-elect, kind of, probably, sort of. People were noticing how he just nonsense statements. He just doesn't make any sense at all. He abuses language better than the rest of them. Al Mohler abuses language in a way that you don't even know he's abusing it. Yeah, he's probably, most probably the president-elect. Like, what is that supposed to mean? Most probably the president-elect, or whatever it was he said. It was something like that. Like, that's so twisted, man. Like, what? That's a satanic way to use language. But then he goes, but of course, we do need to check out all of the instances of fraud to make sure our elections have integrity. But at the end of the day, you better believe that Joe Biden's the president-elect. Otherwise, our election integrity is at risk. So what are you saying, Al? Like how much do you have to twist and distort and abuse language? Like, why don't you just say what you mean? Like, okay, we should be concerned with the integrity of our election, so we should check out fraud. But not so much so that it overturns the election, because obviously, probably, Kamala Harris and what's-his-face are president-elect, right? Like, so Are we concerned with the integrity of the elections or not? Like, there are so many people that are pushing this narrative that you shouldn't question the results of the election because the integrity of democracy is at stake, when in actuality, what most people are saying is, yeah, but if there's cheating, then the integrity of the elections are already at stake. And so do you see what's going on here? Like, to even question the result, that's actually the sin. Not the sin of cheating, not the sin of lying about elections and dead people voting. That's actually not the problem. The problem that holds the election integrity and the integrity of our democracy and in the balance, it's not the actual cheating, it's the complaining about the cheating. That's the problem. Guys, that's satanic. That's a satanic way to look at this. It's like, no, it's not the sin itself that's the problem. It's actually you calling out the sin. Doesn't that explain Big Eva in a nutshell? Doesn't that explain Big Eva in a nutshell? No, it's not the sodomy that's in the church that's the problem. It's not the people that wear gay clothing while they're on the stage, pretending to lead worship that's the problem. No, it's the way you called them sodomites. That's the real problem. The way you pointed out that, that guy wearing the V-neck, that's like a really, feminine way to dress. You probably shouldn't be leading the worship of Christ. No, that's the real problem. The fact that you call this V-neck feminine, that's the real problem. Like, guys, this is twisted, man. That explains Big Eva in a nutshell. And I would say, guys, it's time to find our big boy pants. It's time to find our testicles and to say, nope, I'm not going to let you abuse language that way. You don't get to have love your neighbor, because that's something that my Lord made up, right? So my Lord made up love your neighbor. You don't get to mash that into a million, pieces like a Play-Doh and make it look like whatever you want it to be. No, masks are not loving your neighbor because it's not in the book. Right? Christ didn't say that. When I say that you can't dress feminine and worship God on stage with the smoke and all that stuff and sing, very feminine songs, like that actually comes from the book. So that's not the problem calling that out. It's you, the one that's feminizing God's worship. That's actually the problem. No. It's not how I'm saying things. It's what you're doing. We need to insist on that stuff. We can't let these weasels abuse language like this anymore. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.